Welcome to Badaboom. I'm Chris. And I'm excited because I get to talk to my friend Sam about the Xbox Showcase. What's up, Sam?
Hey, what's going on, Chris?
Chilling, chilling. I'm glad I finally got to get you on and we can yap about games the same way we do on a regular basis. So,
Oh
what did you
yeah,
think? We talked about it a little bit before, but for me, I'm not, as you know, an Xbox fan by any stretch of the imagination. And
yeah.
I was pretty excited about it. I walked away as like, hey, like I might buy an Xbox.
For exactly the same price as they were at launch. The plans all coming together. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, I'm kind of the opposite.
$80
Like,
billion later.
yeah, right,
You
right.
got one more customer.
They're gonna get you 600 somewhere.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm kind of the opposite. I've been pretty like Xbox has been my main console my whole life because I played like Halo as like a little kid, and then from there it was just like I just had to get the Xbox to play Halo. Um, so this in a way was like the first time at one of these conferences, like an E3 conference, where I've been like, oh hell yeah, like this feels like a really good like it feels really good to have an Xbox. Um, which was really exciting. Like I think I said this to you earlier. Every single game, I was like, I might play that. I might play that. And then all of them said Game Pass, which again is like I don't know how it works. You know, it's like
$80 billion
uh
later.
yeah,
Game Pass is
yeah,
worth it.
yeah, it's worth it. Um, it's like I don't need to understand how the TV, shows me pictures. It just does and I like it. I don't need to understand how Game Pass makes someone somewhere money. Um, all I know is I'm gonna pay $15 a month and I'm gonna get all these games like kind of for free. So I'm stoked to play like almost everything on the list. The thing I will say is I will not be shocked if in like somewhere in the middle of the next year we get that Game Pass price bump.
Yeah, I think it maybe come sooner. I
Yeah,
think they're just waiting for the heat to die down on all the
two
studio
weeks.
closures and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
And that's a funny thing of sort of um like after it, you're kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop because you're like, well, like Xbox and Sony, PlayStation, they've been in an eternal battle of
hmm
fumbling.
hmm
So it's like you're kind of like, oh, this is exciting,
yeah,
but what's coming after? Like, what's coming
yes,
after this? Like, for example, as an Xbox fan, as you are, like, okay, I'm really excited. All these things are available, but in 2 weeks, are they going to announce, hey, this is available on every platform, no
right,
matter what? Game Pass coming to PlayStation.
yeah,
So, so as much as you get excited about it, it's hard to kind of like let go of that morbid feeling of like, wait, like is Xbox as is it a brand? Is it a platform? Is it a console? But I think at this point, the console wars are kind of over, because it's clear that a lot of these games are so big
yeah,
that there is no way, even if you sort of try to be ignorant of it, that these games could really survive just on an Xbox platform. Because I don't
yeah. I
really
mean,
think anyone in this is not a financial podcast, but in this economy is spending another 600 on an Xbox if they had a PlayStation. I think
right,
at one point people made that one-time investment and was like, okay, like I guess I'm stuck with no games on PlayStation. Same way there were a lot of, players that were stuck in the previous generation with an Xbox and they're like,
yeah.
well, I guess I got Sunset Overdrive.
Which fucking slap? That's a great game.
Yeah.
That is a
Yeah,
great
one
game.
game.
I don't know. That's a bag fumble of all time from Microsoft letting because then they went and made all those great Spider-Man games. I guess obviously like Xbox wasn't going to get the Spider-Man games, but
Yeah. I mean,
um
they had 70 billion. I mean,
they
it would have
could
been
yeah
worth it. I think they could have gotten the license.
yeah, I mean this is it's a pretty exciting time. I've never been like I have Xbox and I have Switch. Um, I always look enviously at at PlayStation because of all the great stuff that's been on there, and it's literally that. It's like it would be nice if I could drop 500 on a PlayStation and play Spider-Man. As you know, like I'm Spider-Man obsessive, so it's like this really weird gap for me to not have played that game. But like this is this is the most certain I've felt about like, oh, it's okay. Like it's okay that I'm not gonna get a PlayStation anytime soon. Because I've got all of these games that they were pretty good with release dates. Some things were missing release dates. But like there's a lot coming in 2024 that I was pretty stoked about. The Starfield stuff that just dropped looked pretty exciting to me too. I loved that game. And then they announced so much for 2025 that I'm like, man, 2026 is going to be a great year for video games.
Yeah, I wonder who's working on them though.
Yeah,
It's
they're all going to get delayed. They're all going to
yeah,
get bumped. They're all going to get bumped back, I'm sure.
yeah,
Uh,
like Phil went to the back and it's like, oh man, you guys are really getting to work, right? He's like,
mhm.
wait, where are all the developers?
Where they at?
Who's working on this? Wait, you
Where?
told them we're 6 weeks behind?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a month behind.
Yeah.
Well, I'm
No,
not going to
but
be the one to tell
there was a lot of that, but it also goes to show you sort of like those acquisitions they made of Activision Blizzard, Bethesda,
them.
especially Bethesda. It seems like they're carrying a lot of those bigger titles
Yeah.
and sort of like pushing things forward and stuff. Like between Indiana Jones,
Hmm.
Doom.
Hmm.
So you have a lot of these like really big games that are coming from them, that are like more sort of like what has made like PlayStation such a staple platform where you have like, hey, these really great like singular experiences.
Yeah.
Um, but obviously you have the big Call of Duty, but that's multi-platform. But it's great to kind of see like this is the closest like any event has felt like E3 in quite a bit, where it's
Hmm.
like, oh, like there's like a bunch of I feel like if you polled like 10 people, like everyone will almost have like a different game that they're excited about. It could be Doom, it could
Yeah.
be Gears of War, it could be any of those games, and people could have like a really valid like case as to why that's probably their most anticipated or how that can be the biggest game. Whereas
Hmm.
like you watch something like, the Sony State of Play and you're like, what am I supposed to be excited for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
I was on the edge of my
another
seat.
Overwatch
Yeah.
a clone, like I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. I was fully on the edge of my seat throughout it. With everything coming out. I thought it was cool. Like so it opened with Blops, which is really exciting. I haven't played a Call of Duty campaign in a while, but I'll definitely hit this one up because he said like it's dropping day one into Game Pass, which is sick. I thought it was interesting how he framed it though, because it's like right at the top of the thing, they hit you with that trailer, and then he goes, for the first time in it's the first time in 10 years that Call of Duty has been on like the Xbox stage, because they used to have that tight association with it back in the 360 days. And then uh he was like, and for the first time in I don't know how many years, I don't know what he said. Um every player is going to be playing the same game on the same day because of like all of the play it a week early on PlayStation,
The exclusive also like
the
content that
guns.
PlayStation would get
Yeah.
early and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I also feel like they're in that sort of that space where I did kind of notice, and maybe like I'm like digging too deep into it, that they like called it like Game Pass versus like
Mhm.
Xbox Game Pass. So I
Mhm.
think it was very much sort of like a way of them sort of like, hey, we're a games company versus like
Yeah.
we're a console company. And you kind of see that transition happening just based on the way they sort of like the messaging and stuff like that. And
Yeah,
I,
I mean, they're games pub like they are the largest. I mean, we said this, they're a third of the
yeah,
industry, right? They're the largest games publisher of all time. Like no one can even come close to the number of studios that are now under Microsoft.
Xbox
Not
Game
to
Studios.
Xbox Game Studios. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, no, because they even break it out, right? So like Microsoft owns that, and so there are some things that are like Xbox Game Studios presents, and then there'd be something to be like Blizzard, then it would say Activision, and then it would say Bethesda, right? So they've almost made Xbox Game Studios its own, like that's where the coalition is, which is Gears. That's where
Yeah.
343 is, which is Halo. And Fable is done by Playground, right? And those are all Xbox Game Studios. But Machine Games, the Indiana Jones people, they got like a Bethesda heading. So I wonder if, I don't know, maybe it's business reasons that they sort of spin it out into three groups.
Well, I think another reason why it's into those groups is just because of the nature of the like I think acquisitions. What I actually really liked is that for the first time in years, I can call Activision Activision and Blizzard
Hmm.
Blizzard.
Yeah, yeah.
for, s- for so long, I always found it like weird that it's like Activision Blizzard. It's like, oh, they make kind of like, yeah, they're the same company, but can we call them two different things?
Yeah,
Like, you know what I
yeah.
mean? It's like, hey, can we drop the in the Facebook? Because it just like, hey, like it's like they're two almost completely different things. Yes, the culture is kind of the same and stuff. So I did kind of actually like the way they broke it down. And even when they
Hmm.
showed sort of the graphic of all the different like, like companies,
Yeah.
they made you could tell they made an effort to put like Activision and Blizzard on two different sides
Hmm.
of
Hmm.
the graphic so that it didn't, like you could clearly see there's a separation. And obviously that company had its problems with like culture and all the things that they were getting
For
into.
sure.
So I think like, hey, like, you know big mergers are never really good for anyone, as we saw with all the people that got laid
Yeah.
off and all that. But you could see sort of like that separation might actually do really well for what Blizzard's able to do with things like Diablo and Overwatch. Maybe there's not so much of a focus on like monetizing these games afterwards, and they could focus on what they're known for, creating great experiences for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, if they can bring me StarCraft Ghosts, that'll make my life, man.
That
You
would be
remember
worth
that?
the 80 billion.
That would be worth the 80 billion. If you like, bro, if they popped up, like the only way they top this next year would be like they need to do a Halo thing. They need to do probably like a Splinter Cell thing and StarCraft Ghosts. You just keep amping up. But what today really popped for you? You said that it's maybe the first time you've been like,
I mean,
actually, I
Gears.
might buy an Xbox.
Yeah, Gears, like that was like especially sort of like, and also like Black Ops, like, I mean, yeah, that they're getting me back, but like having sort of like, hey, round-based zombies,
Oh yeah.
like a campaign that kind of looks compelling and stuff like
Hmm.
that. It's I'm ready for my pressure to raise again and me to curse at the screen when I'm playing multiplayer and all that.
Yeah, yeah.
And Gears, and like I was telling you too, like it was cool because I kind of like was in and out. Like I watched it, like rewatched it after, but like while it was on, because I was getting ready for certain things, I was like
Hmm.
in and out, and there were so many games that like I was popping in, and I was like, this looks cool,
Yeah,
without even
yeah.
like any of the context and stuff like that, or like the hype of sort of like some of the cinematics, just seeing like gameplay of certain things, like seeing the Perfect Dark gameplay. I was like,
Hmm.
ooh, that looks cool. I wonder who this cool lady with this
Yeah,
pistol is.
yeah,
Oh, wait. I know what this
yeah.
is. So little things like that definitely like really sort of made me go like, wait. And also like I think I'm at a tipping point of like, hey, like this PlayStation has been kind of like a paperweight. I haven't been playing any type of video games. I've actually been trying to
Mm-hmm.
find older games like a Red Dead 2 to jump back into and stuff like
Oh
that, to
yeah.
kind of have something to play. And it's hard, like there's really nothing to be excited about. It's like, yeah, like PlayStation has like some things on the horizon, whether it be like the Wolverine game. I'm
Hmm.
sure there's going to be like another Spider-Man with an expansion and stuff like that.
Totally.
But it's like, hey, like these development cycles are just so long. And Xbox did make the right move in making all these acquisitions, because it's clear that they understood like, hey, like this is pretty barren. But because they made such big commitments financially, like now it's like, well, on one hand, yes, you you paid to win, but now that you like won in terms of like all these things you have, the only way to really see a return on investment is to make them available on every platform.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we're gonna start to see that. Like a lot of this stuff that's coming out, I think their proposition, right, is like, hey, have an Xbox or have a PC and subscribe to Game Pass. And that will, maybe that plays the long game, and eventually they get people, buying. That's what's nice about like the Series S, right? Is it can almost, you can have your big dog PlayStation 5 or PlayStation 5 Pro or whatever, and then kick it with an Xbox Series S. And yeah, you're not playing like the, maxed out specs version of the game, but most games run super well on it. And it can be your little Game Pass box where you get all this sort of constant hum of games. Because I'm looking at this list, and for me, like, I mean, so many things really. So I mean, Doom looks sick. I
Yeah.
can't wait. I can't wait to play Doom. Um, for me, yeah, Gears of War looked great. Like I think I told you that that little Mad World sting literally brought a tear to my eye. Um,
Cinema.
bro, you look at that cutscene too, like you see like young Marcus Phoenix scared, his bandana comes off. He he brains the locust with a
Mhm.
television. Like there's that moment where he gets slammed up against the ceiling, and in the like moment of fear, his dog tags kind of pop out, those gear dog tags. And you know that like in those games you go around and you collect like the dog tags of, you know um of cog soldiers who have died defending. And so like to see that in that moment, I mean, they're just like they're operating on an extra level there, and for that to be an Unreal, like I honestly can't wait. Couple like Expedition 33, I thought that looked pretty hype. That's the the woman is like painting a number, and everyone who is that age just dies.
It's Death Note.
Um, yeah, yeah, it's like it's Death Note mixed with what's that movie? I think we've talked about it. Justin
Death
Timberlake's in
Note the
it.
movie.
Yeah, Death Note the one. No, the one Justin Timberlake's in it, and you pay to like extend your life, like the
Oh,
rich people
is it
live
On
forever.
Time or Time?
Yeah, yeah, something like that. Yeah. Um, mixtape. Mixtape is like that's those are so the people who made I think apparently Artful Escape are behind Mixtape. Um, as I was saying, so
Yeah,
like
State of
that's
Decay 3.
yeah,
Uh Again,
Fable.
like the yeah, Fable. That's again like some of it goes to show you that just like the list is like every time you mention something, you're like, wait, like I forgot like this big thing happened. And that's
Yeah,
what E3 used to be, you know.
yeah, yeah.
But because of sort of like the state of like the games industry and stuff,
Hmm.
and like watching Summer Games Fest the other day, I was kind of like, hey, like I just don't get that feeling anymore. Like where I'm excited,
Yeah.
like these things used to be exciting. It used to
Yep.
get hype, and that's kind of like what brought you into sort of like the console wars of being like,
Hmm.
yes, my team. But
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
even if you're an Xbox fan, it's like yes, you're like yes, my team. But wait, what's gonna happen?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Is
mean, and I think a lot of this stuff will go. And frankly, like, I mean, they've been saying for a long time, like it's all PC, right? So there's nothing. I don't think there's anything that you can play on Xbox that you can't play on PC. There are a few things you can play on PC that you can't play on Xbox. Um, they did the World of Warcraft trailer, and that's still only PC.
but only nerds play that.
Only nerds. There are people who've been playing that game, man, for like
Dude,
20,
I
20
I mean
years.
I used to think that obviously you have the word like the famous South Park episode and stuff. And then like when I
Yeah,
finally got into high school, that's when I started like meeting people that actually played WoW.
yeah,
And some of them were like, "Oh yeah, I just sold my character for like 5K." I'm like, "What? Like, in-game
yeah,
currency?" It's like, "No, actual money."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm like, "Who's buying?" I'm like, "What?"
There's
That's when
like the
I
yeah the guns in like oh, what's the game, the one Valve runs, the huge tournaments. It's a first person
Unreal
shooter.
Tournament.
No, 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 no. It was a spin-off of
CS:GO or
Half-Life.
something.
CS:GO,
Uh,
yeah.
well, see, Counter Strike, is that a spinoff? There's something
It's
else, I think.
Counter-Strike. Yeah, Counter-Strike was off of Half-Life, wasn't it?
Okay. Oh, I
I
mean, I
think
don't know.
so.
I know Counter Strike is huge. You know,
Yeah.
those kids that play like CS:GO, like I think there was like a huge scandal of like people like scamming or like gaming the system with like lotteries and stuff like
Hmm.
that. You know what I mean? So, yeah, those games that you think kind of have like an underbelly, like they're not like it's kind of like if you think about it, like the NBA, right? Like you see
Hmm.
the NBA all the time, it has all the stars and stuff, but in reality, the most popular sport by far is the NFL. And it's
Mm.
like, and it's the same thing with a lot of those games. Like like you make the joke, like, hey, like who plays that? But it's like, well, 100 million people do actually
Every year. Yeah.
every year for the last like 20 years.
Yeah.
So those games are really sort of interesting in terms of like the community they've built, and obviously like people keep playing them and playing them. And now they're owned by, Microsoft, and now they're just Blizzard instead of Activision Blizzard.
Hmm. Which is, I think, like the more so. I mean, they talk a big game about sort of getting out of these studios' way to make something that they want to make, but like what kind of makes me nervous in here is obviously, so we had the kind of high profile. There was a lot of studios that got closed, but on Sony's side, and Embracer Group closed like a bunch of folks too. But on the Xbox side, you had Tango GameWorks, who made the
Hi-Fi Rush.
Hi-Fi Rush, which is such a sick game, and that kind of breaks my heart, because that was one of my favorite games last year, and it was like the breakout star of this conference last year because it was the Shadow Drop.
Yeah.
So it's the one that you just like popped up, and you're like, all right, cool, we're playing this incredible, rhythm game, rhythm combat game, and then Arcane Austin, who that one, like it sucks, but you're like, okay, I kind of understand that because Redfall was so bad, like, and Microsoft has a hand in that, obviously, like
Yeah.
it not being successful. But my worry is in the um Phil gave an interview with IGN and Ryan McCaffrey, and in that interview he's like, all right, like I have to run a profitable company, basically. Like he talks about like having to make hard business decisions because realities of the market, which is, or what's the phrase? Unexpected market headwinds. Basically is like
Or he's
uh
like, hey,
the,
he spent $80 billion to
yeah.
get me to spend $600 on one Xbox
Yes. Yeah,
to
yeah, yeah.
acquire one more customer, which was me.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where like one of the games that really popped for me was South of Midnight, right? Which I think looked great. It had that sort of like not quite claymation, but almost stop motion like art style in the cutscenes, but then a lot of like pretty real time third person action combat in the main gameplay, and kind of like Bayou vibe. And that game looks like it's going to be great, and it looks like it's going to be fun, but it's not going to do Call of Duty numbers, right? It's not going to, it's not going to be Gears. It's not going to be Halo. Does that mean that this studio is going to make this game? People are going to love it. And then when it comes time to like, all right, now do we invest in this studio for another 4 or 5 years as they spin up another game? Or do we just close them and, spin up a new studio when it's time to spin up a new studio? And that's what I'm like worried that like basically this whole industry is going to become a series of make game, unless that game is going to have a direct sequel, close studio, move on, spin up a new one, and just you keep going like that. It just kind of worries me.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, and that's a really good sort of point to kind of like get to where we're at. Cause again, as exciting as this was, you kind of have that feeling of like dread of like, okay, what's next? Like, hey, like all these games can't be that successful. You know what I mean? It's
no,
like, like all these games can't be the biggest game of the year. All of these games can't be Call of Duty.
Right.
And so it's like, hey, like you could even look at some of the more successful studios and be like, hey, like if you don't produce like a hit with this, like, you're a big fan of like Starfield, you know what I mean? Like, hey,
Mhm.
like was that a hit? In
Yeah.
in terms of like metrics and stuff. And like if it wasn't, are they able to explore something like that? And I think a problem with sort of the framework of what's a hit, it's like, hey, like some things are great just because they exist. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like, some of the movies that have come out that have kind of like flopped at the box office. And it's like, hey, like in 10 years, will you know how much Furiosa made? Or
Yeah.
will you just be watching it the same way you watch Fury
Mhm.
Road? Fury
Mhm.
Road didn't make $1 billion, but
Yeah.
it exists and we all get to
Mhm.
enjoy it at one point, And
Yeah.
another
And
problem
the
sort of
world and the art form is better for it existing. Like, will like rhythm and like games uh, games will be better for Hi-Fi Rush having existed. 100%. There will be people who are inspired by Hi-Fi Rush and that will raise the standard of the kind of game that they produce. But Tango Gameworks won't make another one.
and with that, it's sad. And then also too, because of sort of the shift to digital and everything being under one company, it's like, hey, like what is the future of preserving these games and being able to play them in the future? You know what I mean? It's like, hey, if they're
That's
all available on Game Pass and there's no physical disc, and
yeah.
even with the physical disc, you have to download something, like how do we sort of like in the future revisit these games? And that's something that's even been tough for me, where I'm like trying to like go back and find games to play now that like there's nothing really good to play that I can find compelling. It's hard to kind of be like, like I do miss being able to like go on my shelf and grab something that was like
Mhm.
really old and maybe play it for like an hour.
Yeah, I think that's
And just
something that's a place where Xbox, I think, and this is me, like I get a steady diet of, their press releases and things that they say and other podcasts that I listen to that, are more Xbox centric. And like they talk a big game about game preservation. Like they even shouted it out. Sarah Bond said it in the closeout there, like right before they hit you with the one last thing. Um, and she said, no, like we're going to be, redoubling our efforts on in game preservation. I don't know what that actually looks like. But I'm glad that it's become a topic of conversation as everything has moved to digital. Like the last physical game I bought, I think was Elden Ring.
I've only bought
Everything else I
ones for my
buy
Switch.
digitally. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's made it so easy, like the libraries and stuff, but it does become like kind of like taxing when you, especially like when you think about some of these games as franchises. You know what I mean? Like imagine you have all the Gears of War games, right? And
Hmm.
then one suddenly becomes unavailable because of, so they remove it from a store or something
Sure.
like that. Gears, like obviously, I think Gears will be available no matter what. But let's just use
I
that
hear
as an
you. Yeah, yeah,
example.
yeah.
It becomes like, wait, like I can't go and play this one. It's the same thing with, I think it kind of happens with Arkham. With Arkham Origins is not easily accessible, and it's not
Hmm.
collected in a lot of the like the pack because it was made by a different
A
studio and
different
stuff
studio.
like
Yeah.
that. So the code, like for example, with Arkham Shadow going on, if you had a MetaQuest, which I don't,
Hmm.
if you decided to want to play that, that game is kind of a direct sequel to Arkham
Hmm.
Origins. So if you
Hmm.
wanted to revisit Arkham Origins, unless you really have it for PC, which from what I remember, and this is like a vague memory,
Hmm.
and it might have been Arkham Knight, it runs terribly on PC, or at least the first version of it. So it's like, hey, like, and I don't even know if it's available on those like on Steam or anything like that. So like if you want to revisit something like that, like how's that look? But I mean that's a conversation that could go like deep, deep. And I just
Oh
brought it
yeah.
up as we're going into this sort of feeling of dread of like, hey, like when is Xbox gonna, in 2 weeks? And now it's like actually all those game studios we realize like we might need to hire some of these people back to
Yeah.
work on these games
Yeah. Yeah.
because some of them are supposed to turn around in a year's time. So it's like, and I do think they did make an effort to be like, hey, these are our partners. We're
Mhm.
really proud of what they're doing.
Mhm.
We really support them, but we're a business.
Yeah, I mean, it's exactly that. And I've got a tiny worry in the back of my head with as I'm looking at like my bookshelf, and I've got my family gave me a recent reprint of Watchmen, right? And in the corner of it, it says now an HBO series, but it's not. You can't watch it on HBO anymore. They literally pulled the incredibly successful, critically beloved Watchmen series off of Max, right? You can't
Yeah. I
like
think it's
and
on
so
Netflix. I think they pulled it and put it back, but still, it kind of puts you in a
like
place of like, wait, like if something like that could get pulled, it's like a hi-fi rush, you know?
yeah, yeah, it's like what happens when Microsoft realizes that they can take a tax break if they eliminate um I don't know, you know, the Gears of War series. I mean, they're not going to again, but like for example's sake, right? You will they do that? Will they just tuck it all away? And if you didn't have it downloaded or if you didn't have the physical copy, is it gone? I mean, I hope not. Again, they're talking about it, which is a positive sign. And Xbox has kind of got this like this reputation now, or they're trying to build this reputation of being the good guys, but then they end up having to make normal business decisions, and so then they basically like betray you, and so that feels crappy. Whereas I think we've talked about this, like you don't hear anything, like especially since Reggie left Nintendo, like you don't hear anything from Nintendo. So they could close the studio and we'd have no idea.
We'd have no idea. But also they don't really they're again just a games company. So like some of the big financial headwinds that you see some of these other studios go through, it's like, hey, Sony owns a movie studio, they
Hmm.
own consumer electronics. Microsoft is the biggest company in the world, so they have to sort of like justify sort of that growth story when it comes to making an acquisition like the Activision Blizzard one where it costs like $69 billion. So they sort of have to play in that game, whereas with Nintendo, famously sort of has always just worried about games.
Hmm.
Occasionally, like when things have gotten tough, they're like, all right, let's make a mobile Mario Kart game.
Mm.
That's one sort of like way, or like, maybe we'll make one movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, hey, let's pay one bill. You know what I mean? Let's
Yeah.
license this one thing out and stuff like that. Whereas, sort of Microsoft and Sony sort of they play a different game, and that's why sort of like I think the sort of Xbox as like a console thing and being more of like a platform amongst everyone is sort
Hmm.
of inevitable because as a company like Microsoft is not in the business of like having a closed system in a closed market. It's about like growing it. And they did use that language a lot during the showcase of being like, hey,
More
we want to
players.
grow more
Yep.
players and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
that's not intuitive to sort of making people like, hey, and I think sort of like even when they announced those new like versions of the console, it was like, hey, there's a diskless version, there's this
Hmm.
version, there's a two
Hmm.
terabyte to sort of like scale on like, hey, this is what your budget is, get ready for holiday. But again, I don't think a lot of these games also are going to be available next year. So,
Hmm.
and if you already have a PS5, and also not a lot of people do have a PS5 because that's why
No.
they still release most of these games on PS4 still.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I don't think anyone's like, hey, I need a new console. This like that. I don't know if I mean maybe I'm just too old and I don't know what is on like kids' wish list, but
Sure.
I'd imagine like the Switch, the beauty of it, it's almost become like a Game Boy where you could have multiple of them where you're like, hey,
Hmm.
like, there's this cool color or like I want the OLED. Like I have two. I have a Switch Lite and a Switch OLED.
Oh, nice.
So, but because it's so affordable, you could do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think sort of like Xbox and Microsoft really sort of have planted a flag, and they've sort of revitalized like people's energy around getting excited for games. But I do think we are in a place where like, hey, like this AAA bubble may is still in a position where it just may pop any day.
Yeah, I mean, the if the online buzz is anything to go off of, like, everyone who I follow in the games industry was like, "Wow, that
All
was
two
that like."
Xbox podcasts you follow.
Yeah. They're like, "Wow, that was an Xbox showcase," like, that was
They
like.
I mean, they said that about the, last 5, but
Yeah, but I mean, like, this one.
I'm just
This,
bothering.
uh like, this is, for me, for my money, like, I have never felt so excited for, like, the full duration of a showcase. Like, that's probably the best I've ever felt watching one of these E3 style conferences.
Yeah,
Um,
for a long time.
and like, I would have to go back. I'm trying to think of, like, was there a year where we were watching E3 and Sony rolled out, like, Last of Us plus, like, Uncharted plus something
I mean,
else,
even
like.
if it wasn't like that, it was like, like there still was like these epic moments, and then you roll into maybe like Ubisoft showcase and stuff like that because,
Yeah, you're right. There's that
yeah.
that whole weekend, and it'd roll up, and we were gonna still get a Ubisoft Forward, though.
And also when you
Honestly,
could
I'm
probably
sold
still
on
afford
Assassin's
like
Creed.
you could afford maybe an Xbox and a PlayStation. Now it's like everyone's in a place where it's like it's not a thing of like whether you prefer it. It's like, hey, I made a choice years ago, and that's
Hmm.
where I'm at.
Yeah,
It's no longer like, hey, like what am I gonna do this year? And again, this could just be me being old and stuff like that. I don't know if like kids are even having these arguments in school, but you're
yeah,
just like, hey, like I in my house there's a PlayStation and or in my house there's an Xbox or Switch, and
yeah,
that's what we play.
yep.
I'm not really necessarily passionate about it one way or another, but that's what we got.
I think there probably aren't. I bet that there are a good number of people coming off of this who are thinking kind of like you're thinking, right? Where they at the top of the generation, they bought their PlayStation 5, right? And then now, in this moment where you're looking ahead at what PlayStation is offering, and you're going, well, Astrobot looks cool. That looks fun. And then you look over at the other side and you go, all right, maybe I will get, maybe I will see what um, this side looks like, and maybe I'll get a Series S, or maybe I'll get Game Pass on PC if they've got a PC, or I think you were talking about getting like a Rogue Ally or one of those, like one of the many things that can carry Game Pass. And then all of a sudden, like, for me, I got Game Pass thinking like, all right, I'll check this out, and I've just been a subscriber ever since it launched, because every single month there's at least one or two things, whether it's a brand new game or like me being able to go. I think I told you, like, I played they put all the Yakuza games on there, right? Or the Like a Dragon is what they're calling it now, right? And then that when Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth came out, I was like, yep, here's my $70, which was annoying because then literally 2 months later it was discounted to 45, which is ridiculous. But like, I was motivated because, like,
Modern games.
yeah, yeah, exactly. They won my loyalty through, like, playing all these games, or I was able to play, like, Persona 3, or sorry, well, I was able to play Persona 3 Reloaded, but also Persona 5 Royale through Game Pass. Like, all of that was there, and so I just, like, whenever I see a sale of Game Pass, because I know that I'm gonna keep it for a while, like when Target sells it for cheap, I just, like, I stack it. And that way I don't have to think about it. I try and, pay for it up front. Like, I think I'm good through, like, mid
2028.
2025 right now, like, literally, from, like, you know, things that I've done. And this is the first time that I'm looking ahead, thinking like people might actually come over because Game Pass is such an enticing proposition. Because you know, you have it for a year, and it's the cost of like maybe buying 3 or 4 video games like at at launch, and instead
Yeah.
of getting 3, 4, 5 video games, you're getting literally hundreds, including all of these really exciting looking titles. There are things that they were saying, hey, this is coming into Game Pass day one for not Xbox things, like the Expedition 33 that I popped
Yeah.
for. That's going into Game Pass. I think the Life is Strange is going in there. Mixtape is going in there. Um,
Game Pass, Game Pass.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they just stuck it on. I think like pretty much everything, which is
Game Pass, soon to be $30 a month.
soon to be. And you know what? This is why I'm stacking now.
Yeah.
There's been this rumor of doing a like a family plan for it.
Yeah.
I'll be curious if they roll that up.
I think eventually there'd probably be a family plan if there was more adoption.
Yeah,
And hopefully this gets them to that place. But
yeah, right.
I
Because
do,
their numbers aren't growing like they wanted
yeah.
them to grow. I think they
So
were
before
reporting.
you're sort of like adding like family plan, it's like Netflix. Before you could just add people to like, hey, here's my password.
Hmm.
So I think they're at that point where they're like, hey, we just want you guys to try this and like, hey, share it if you want or whatever. And then eventually, once the sort of numbers start to grow, I'm sure they'll add tiers or family plans or God, if they ever add like create like an ad tier, that'd be the end
Yeah.
of the whole
Oh
game.
God.
But
Yeah.
this was great. I really enjoyed the showcase, despite sort of the time it came in, with all
Yeah.
the studio closures and sort of like where the industry is at large. But it is good to kind of get some good news and be excited for what we're all here for, which is the games. So
For
thank
sure.
you,
Yeah.
Sam,
You
for
just gotta
coming.
watch out for those economic headwinds, man. Like you keep keep your head down. Keep
Keep your
low.
head down.
Keep-
That's all you could do. All you could do. But hey,
yeah.
my $600 is coming. So
Phil, get ready.
yeah,
Get ready.
Bill, your kids could have a good Christmas this year. You don't have to
Yeah.
skip it.
Yeah, Phil will be able to afford a $600 console for his kids.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sam, for coming on. It was great to be able to, yap and talk about games. And I'm excited.
Yeah.
I can't wait to play Gears with you and sort of get back
Hell
into the
yeah.
Xbox ecosystem. So with
Hell
that,
yeah.
bada boom.
Hey, bada boom.